A big shout out and thank you to our featured sponsors. Special thanks to Jane Haas Photography for sharing your elegant space with the Nurtured Woman podcast. Elevate your online presence effortlessly with Jane Haas's personal brand photography. Don't settle for less. Book your transformational session today. Call 732-673-9893. Get your home summer ready with Bleaches NC. Is your carpet looking tired or stubborn stains and odors lingering? Let Bleaches NC IICRC certified specialists use advanced technology to give your carpets and upholstery a fresh, sanitized look. Safe for your family and pets, they'll make your home feel like new. Mention the Nurtured Woman podcast for 15% off your first cleaning. Call 984-51-GRIME or 984-514-7463 today. Looking to buy or sell your home in the Lake Norman area? Trust me, reach out to Kristen Dorninger. With years of local experience, Kristen makes the real estate process smooth and stress-free. Get personalized guidance whether you're buying your dream home or wanting to sell it for the best price. Call her today at 704-492-6573. Welcome to The Nurtured Woman, a podcast bringing you conversations from a wide range of guests, from medical and wellness practitioners to wine and culinary experts, fashion leaders, and other trusted field insiders. Join me, Michelle Droll, your guide, as we delve into topics that inspire you. Imagine being trapped in a brain that won't slow down. No matter how hard you try, every thought urgent, every impulse shouting louder than reason. That's life for a child with ADHD. It's not a choice, it's not bad behavior, it's a constant battle inside their own mind, one they didn't ask for and can't easily explain. In this episode, we go beyond the labels and dive into what ADHD truly feels like and how understanding it can change everything. Joining me is Brandie Burleson, a licensed therapist and certified clinical services provider for ADHD. Brandie shares powerful insights into the neurological, emotional, and practical realities of ADHD, along with strategies that offer real hope and direction. Hi, Brandie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, let me make sure that I understand your background. You are a licensed therapist with an expertise in ADHD, correct?
That is correct. I am a certified clinical services provider for ADHD, which means that I can evaluate a child or an adult if they're struggling with symptomology of ADHD and help provide them with ideas and tools and plans for success and or offer referrals for them if they would like to talk to their doctor about other alternatives like medication.
Okay, so I invited you to speak specifically about ADHD. So let's just jump right in.
Yes, ma'am.
What is ADHD?
ADHD is an acronym for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is a wiring issue of the brain. For a long time, it was thought to be something completely different, but they have done many studies now about how the brain is wired. And there is a miscommunication, a delay between the messaging of the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And the front of the brain is the prefrontal cortex, which is your executive functioning, the ability to critically think before you do, plan, organize. So there's a miscommunication within that region. There's also a delay in development in that region. Studies have shown there's a 3 to 5 year delay. So if you have a child who is 12 years old, the front part of their brain is about a 9 or a 10-year-old. So you are working with a different age brain than the chronological age of the child. The same thing with adults. It varies over time when you get into the adult side of things, but for the most part, the brain has a delay of about 3 to 5 years. And then there's also some dysregulation in some hormones, dopamine, norepinephrine, the reward seeking, and the stress management of input and output within the brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple questions that I have.
Yeah.
Are you saying that maturity-wise, we are dealing with someone who operates at a much younger age than their regular age? Or are you saying their executive function is performing at that level?
It is the executive functioning part of the brain that is the struggle. We can have a child who has the emotional maturity of their chronological age, but their executive functioning, the ability to plan, to focus, to think about next steps or how I'm going to break this apart and get this completed, there is a delay in that part. A lot of times there is an emotional maturity delay as well, just by the nature of the social awareness, the social cues, the ability to pick up what somebody is not saying and then know what to do next. So sometimes there is a delay with the emotional side of things as well, the emotional maturity. But specifically, we're talking about the structure of the brain, and the executive functioning part of the brain is where the delay is.
Can you speak a little bit about what you mean when you say executive functioning?
Yes. So the brain is like in two parts. We have the back part of the brain. It's the very first thing to develop in the womb. Is where your fight, flight, freeze comes from. It's your stress management. It's your ability to take care of yourself in the outside world. And then you have the front part of the brain, and it is highly sophisticated. It is always on because it is what has helped keep humanity alive, right? But then we have the front part of the brain, which is the executive function. The prefrontal cortex is what it's called. I call that the thinking brain. And it takes late 20s before it's fully developed in a non-ADHD brain. And so when you have a misfiring between the back of the brain and the front of the brain, a miscommunication, some wiring, so to speak, issues, it does not communicate with the executive function part of the brain. So the executive functioning part of the brain is the ability to think, to slow yourself down, not run out into the road to get that ball because you want to look for cars. The ability to chunk your homework. If you have a paper that's due, the ability to say, I'm going to work on this part today and this part tomorrow and that part the next day. With ADHD, they'd rather wait until the last minute to do it because they cannot figure out how to chunk it. They want to chunk it, but they don't know how to do that. The brain is not instructing them in how to actually make that happen. And so executive function is the boss of the brain. And it is the part of the brain that tells the rest of you what to do. Not when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, but how to function in life. And so remembering to turn off the stove after you take something out of the oven, that comes from the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the executive function. And when that's not firing on all cylinders, we forget.
So when things aren't firing properly, that is the dysfunction.
Yes.
Okay. I am wondering something. When we procrastinate, we put it off, we create a situation where we're in a heightened, excited state when that thing is finally due. Does it help someone who has ADHD create the extra dopamine they need because they're in this heightened, oh my gosh, I got to get this done?
Yeah.
Does it help them focus?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So even though we might look at it and be like, why are they waiting until last minute? The brain is doing what it does best. It's creating a situation where they have the motivation because the dopamine and the adrenaline is there to like do it and get it done. And they can knock it out of the park 90% of the time because they have that energy. Yes, because they have the energy to do it.
So I know that ADHD is a controversial topic.
It is.
Not everyone necessarily believes that this is a thing.
Right.
So walk me through what it feels like for someone who suffers from ADHD. What's their brain doing when they're trying to perform their schoolwork?
Right. I asked some clients of mine specifically what it feels like. And so I'm just going to read you their responses. So one said, it's like trying to watch TV while 10 other channels are playing at once. The ability to focus on the worksheet, but they're hearing the pencil, they're hearing the ceiling fan, they're listening to the dog barking outside or the lawnmower, or their stomach's growling, so they're thinking about what they're going to have for snack, and at the same time trying to focus on that 5+5 sitting in front of them is really, really difficult. Another said it's like running a marathon in sand when everyone else has sneakers. Simple or routine task in this area, it's exhausting because they're trying to focus. They're using all the energy that they can muster up to stay attuned to their work. And it's exhausting because it requires more from them than a non-ADHD brained person. Another one says it's like a timer is always ticking. You can't see it, but it's there. And so there's no real sense of how much time is passing. Their time in their brain is warped. They know there is a deadline, but they can't figure out how to manage that deadline and how to work towards that deadline.
And this would create a self-esteem issue for
Absolutely.
these children.
Absolutely.
They feel like they should be able to complete the work and
Yes.
turn off these other noises and focus on their schoolwork. They're not getting it done, and it impacts their self-esteem.
Absolutely. I can tell you, I work with a lot of adults that have ADHD. And one of the big topics that come up is that they were told that they were too much or too lazy or too slow or too distracted or all the twos. And it becomes an internalized dialogue that they have from their growing up years, that now that they're adults, they're trying to figure out, was I too much? Was I too loud? Was I too lazy? And is that true about them as adults? And what do they want to do with that information now? So that's where therapy comes alongside. It's like, okay, let's talk about this internal dialogue that you're having, and what are you going to do with it? What do you want? What do you want to change?
So it's not an easy thing for a child teen to muscle through these other things going on in their brain.
Oh, no. It's a lot. It's a lot for them to just deal with what's in front of them, and then the internalization of what other people are saying about them, or what they wake up. They are already waking up knowing that, dreading school, because school is hard. School is hard to stay attuned. It's hard to focus. And it's hard if you don't have supportive teachers, or you have other kids that are making fun of them for going too slow or rushing through work or bouncing off the walls or whatever. And so, yes, it is a lot for kids. I mean, we're talking about like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. That's a lot to carry.
Sure. Tell me about one big misconception that people normally have about ADHD. What frustrates you the most?
Well, I have several frustrations, but I think that this thought that they're being lazy or it's a lack of discipline is very, very false. Parents usually do the best they can and with what they have until they know to do something different. And it is not a discipline issue. These children really, really want to do well. They want to be, quote unquote, neurotypical children. They want a non-ADHD brain, but their ADHD brain does not allow for them to experience life in a non-ADHD brained person. And so it is not laziness. It is not a lack of motivation, but it is due to dopamine. They are dopamine seekers because the dopamine is not balanced and regulated in the body and in the brain of an ADHD child. So they are seeking to do things that bring them higher dopamine levels. So it's not that they're avoiding responsibility. They kind of are, but it's because it doesn't bring them joy. It doesn't bring them pleasure. They would rather sit in front of a screen and play a video game because that is a high dopamine response than to sit down and do a worksheet. And this is across the board. Anything that brings them dopamine, sugar, gossip. When I'm working with teenage girls, I'm like, this is a part of dopamine stuff. Yeah. Gossip, anything that makes you feel a little quote unquote high. They're constantly seeking that because it's not balanced in the brain as it is in a non-ADHD brain.
Does misbehaving also help to create that?
Oh, yes. Yes. And bantering back and forth, like arguing with a parent. Sometimes that is typical for the child in the age that they are. Sometimes it is just providing some input, sensory input, that is building that dopamine response in their brain.
Coming right back. Don't go away. Expert cleaning you can trust. Is your carpet looking tired? Stains that won't budge? Smell not so pleasant? We've got you covered. At Bleaches NC, our IICRC certified specialists use state-of-the-art cleaning technology to remove dirt, stains, smells, and allergens from your carpets and upholstery, leaving them fresh, sanitized, and looking their very best. We take pride in long-lasting results with a meticulous approach that's safe for your family and pets. Exclusive offer, mention the Nurtured Woman podcast and save 15% on your first cleaning. Call 984-51-GRIME or 984-514-7463 to book your appointment today. That's Bleaches NC. Did you know that homes listed with the real estate agent sell faster and for more money than those sold by the owner? It's true. And when it comes to selling, no one works harder for you than Kristen Dorninger, a trusted real estate agent with Southern Homes of the Carolinas. She knows the Lake Norman market inside and out, and she's got the marketing, the strategy, and the negotiation skills to get your home sold for top dollar. If you're thinking of selling, don't just list it. Sell it smarter with Kristen. Call Kristen Dorninger today at 704-928-6573. Welcome back to The Nurtured Woman. Now let's dive back into our conversation.
So go back to the candy.
Yeah.
You had said that ADHD kids seek sugar. Why is that? And then what do you do?
Yes. So sugar is one of the number one disruptors in the body, but it is also a dopamine boost, one of the highest dopamine boosts you can have. That's why it's highly addictive. The same thing with caffeine. A lot of the additives that's put in our food, it feels good to the body, so we want more of it. When you're working with an ADHD child, their body struggles to balance the dopamine in their system. So they are constantly seeking it. We call them dopamine seekers. And so what sugar does is it tells the brain, this feels good, yay, pseudo high, I want more of that, more and more and more. And I call that cheap dopamine. It hits real quick and then it crashes real quick, right? It's the same as spreading gossip or being sneaky about something. It's a cheap dopamine. And so what I typically do with kids is try to help them identify the cheap dopamine in their life and then come up with some ways that we can do some healthy dopamine builders. So like sitting out in the sun for 10 minutes or going and eating some really good healthy food with friends or hanging out one-on-one with mom or dad or being able to read a good book or have a good book read to us. Like those are slower, healthier, deeper dopamine builders that can help reset the brain over time. But it's really important to help identify the cheap dopamine because it can lead to some bigger consequences later on in life.
Sure. Diabetes.
Yes. But it also can create an addictive kind of response. And so if we help train them or teach them how to manage the cheap dopamine early, it may not spiral into like energy drinks and then vaping or, more extreme.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
Do you think that the increase in vaping and energy drinks has anything to do with the increased numbers of students with ADHD?
I would strongly suspect it.
I'm not talking that we have scientific evidence here.
Yes.
Interesting thought.
I do believe that there is a correlation. Obviously, there's not a ton of studies out right now regarding vaping in relationship to ADHD, but I suspect that there is probably a very strong correlation.
To be fair, aren't we all dopamine seekers? What's the difference?
Yes, we are all dopamine seekers. So the way that I explain it with children, I try to use basic information. If we have a bucket of a non-ADHD brain and their dopamine level is at a 10, and we look at a bucket of an ADHD brain, their dopamine's at an 8 or a 7. So they have to make up the difference and then some to even feel the dopamine. We all crave dopamine. It is the reward center of our brain. We are driven by reward. We're driven by reward or consequence, but we want reward. For everything that we do, ADHD brain has to make up the difference in trying to regulate their dopamine numbers, so to speak, and then some. So it's like, oh, I'm going to eat that candy, but then I want to eat even more candy because I need to feel that high. I use high. It's not like drug high, but like it kind of is. That's how it's interpreted in the brain. But we are all dopamine seekers. It's just with an ADHD brain, they seek it more. They want it more and they want it faster, and it can end up becoming a real problem as time goes on.
Okay, Brandie, what do we look for? What are the top 5 symptoms that a child will present with?
Sure. Inattention, impulsivity, hyperactivity, difficulty organizing life, emotional reactivity. The list goes on. You want me to stop with just 5?
Well, take a couple of those and tell me, what does it really look like?
Okay. One of the biggest things that parents notice, especially in boys, we'll talk about girls, but especially in boys, is impulsivity. Impulsivity is doing without thinking. When you are little, you don't have the inhibition to slow yourself down. As you grow, that builds. In an ADHD brain, it's not there. And so to slow themselves down, to think before they do, it's really hard. It's very noticeable. Like they'll go and grab something without asking, even though it's been a rule in your house forever and ever. Or they'll go get that electronic that you had locked up because they're not thinking through the consequences of their actions, because it's not there. It's not there to slow them down. They are impulsive and they want what they want. It's a dopamine seeking thing. Okay. Hyperactivity is one that most people have seen. I mean, the inability to sit still, fidget, always having their hands moving or their feet moving, excessive talking, all of that has to do with the hyperactivity, and it's stimulating to the body. So sensory input, always having to feel things or touch things. It goes back to being the too much. You touch too much, you're a bull in a china shop. You know, it's wanting to be in 500 places at one time because they can't slow down. That's very noticeable.
Okay. You mentioned some others.
Yes.
Tell me what it looks like. What are some of the other ones that you mentioned?
So inattention, one of the big ones that a lot of parents see is meltdowns when they get home from school because they have to sit down and do homework. And they have given 5,000% at school to stay attuned to the task and listening to the teacher while at school. And by the time they get home, they're on empty. Actually, by 10 a.m., they're empty. But they have to muster up the strength to stay engaged at school. And then you get them home and you have a meltdown and arguments and frustration about sitting down to do schoolwork. It's because they've got nothing left in the tank. And so that's one of the big noticeable things. Emotional reactivity, where they can have high mood swings, even at the age of 6 or 7 or 8. And we're not talking about, hormones in the preteen years. We're talking about emotional reactivity as a young kid. Not understanding what's going on, or excessive tears. With girls, a lot of times you'll see anger. That is one of the big symptoms that I see in adults that have ADHD that were misdiagnosed when they were kids. And they didn't know that anger is a big piece of that because it's the emotional reactivity part. It does not balance in the brain. That goes back to the norepinephrine, the ability to regulate stress within the body. So we mentioned dopamine. Dopamine and norepinephrine are the two that are imbalanced in an ADHD brain. And so the dopamine seekers try to fix the dopamine side. Norepinephrine, the emotional regulation, the ability to stay in tune or deal with your stress in a healthy, positive way, that is imbalanced as well.
So you say people as adults be angry, they will not be able to regulate their emotions when
some of them
stress impacts them.
Yes.
Okay.
And especially in females. That is one of the key symptoms that we look for adult females. But you can notice it even really early on when the emotional regulation or not understanding, they're not understanding why they're so upset. They can't verbalize it. And so a lot of times what will happen, especially with girls, is they'll start to internalize it and they won't share their emotions. They'll start thinking that there's something wrong with them, which then impacts their self-esteem. It impacts them socially because they feel socially awkward. I can't go out with friends because I don't know how I'm going to respond.
What do you mean they internalize it?
It becomes a narrative that they tell themselves that they're bad, or that they're just an angry person and they don't know how to deal with things, or they're not strong enough to push through, or it becomes a narrative that is untrue. And when we have other people confirming a narrative that we're already telling ourselves, we call it a confirmation bias. Right? We already think that we're bad. And so we're going to hear all the things that people say about us that's bad. And then we're going to have it as a core belief that we're a bad person. When in actuality, all it was that your body didn't know how to regulate itself. Your brain didn't know how to regulate itself. It's not bad. It's not that you're bad. It's we need to equip you with tools to help you learn how to regulate yourself.
Does ADHD therapy, and we'll talk more about that later, but does ADHD therapy address those self-esteem issues? Not just how to manage the ADHD, but now how to deal with the impact of what it caused over time?
Yes. That is, we use CBT, usually cognitive behavioral therapy, because we want to focus on the thoughts and the cognitions that we're living with every day. We wake up and we already have these beliefs about ourselves, and we want to challenge those. We want to test the waters in those to see if it's true. And if it's not true, what are we going to do about it?
I read that there are silent symptoms in females.
Daydreaming, the inability to stay attuned, or they're thinking about that unicorn that's riding through space. Internalizing emotions, we did mention that, but that is not expressing emotions. Like if they've been too angry, then they'll stop being angry on purpose as a form of control. Like, I don't want to be that person, so they don't feel angry anymore, which is not true. It's just internalized. And a lot of times that anger turns on themselves.
Oh.
Because they're not considered good enough.
What does that look like?
It's kind of silent. You don't know that it's there until they're old enough to verbalize that's what's going on. Or sometimes you'll have flat affect, which means that they don't have emotional responses to something that might be exciting, or like there's no tears when tears are usually present for a sad thing. Okay. Perfectionism is also one that shows up a lot, and it is a control thing, right? So if we're not doing everything right, then we need to do everything right. So I'm going to force myself to organize everything the way that it needs to be. And it uses a lot of brain energy. I mean, they might have been taught it, like they might have had a parent to show them, no, you need to organize your backpack just like this. And so they do that, and it becomes a thing that they do every day. But then they want to make that across the board. So all of their books are in order by rainbow color. All of their socks are folded exactly the way that they need to be folded. The feeling of I need to be perfect so I don't look bad or I don't mess up and then get punished for messing up. They will take on a perfectionistic kind of mindset. I've got to be a certain way, and if I don't, that's the end of the world for me.
Okay, so we've talked about what ADHD looks like. We've talked about what's happening in the brain. Can you now tell me 4 or 5 quick remedies that we can use with ourselves or that parents can use to help manage ADHD symptoms without using medication?
Yes.
First, let's talk about that first.
Yes. So, first of all, this wasn't even on my list, but I'm going to throw it in here. Don't take it personal. Your kid is not purposefully defying you and wanting to like get under your skin. It is not personal. It is a brain thing. And if you take it personal, it's going to be really hard to help set them up for success because you're holding it against them. So really try to step back and look at it objectively. That's the number one thing. The other things, quick things. Timers. Timers are your friends. You have timers on your phone. There's electronics everywhere. You can set a timer with an Alexa or a Google or whatever.
Why do timers work?
Timers work because a kid knows that there's going to be an end to it. And if there's an end to it, then and they're going to move on to something else, they can stay attuned. They can give their energy for that 10 minutes of time. Okay. Or if they're on electronics and you say, oh, we need to set a timer for you to get off, then they know that when the timer goes off, it keeps that from being in time blindness. We mentioned that earlier, like a time warp. If there's a timer, they can see it counting down, or they can hear it counting down, or they can check in on their phone, and it keeps them in the time zone, so to speak.
Okay.
Breaking or chunking assignments, especially homework. I am a firm believer that have kids do their homework after a snack once they get home. I would have them be active for 10 minutes when they get home. 10 or 15 minutes, go jump on a trampoline. Trampolines are fantastic because it helps reset all the parts of the body. So a trampoline helps. Exercise helps. But 10 or 15 minutes of that, and then 10 or 15 minutes of homework. Set a timer. Take a break after 10 or 15 minutes. Have them go be active again. Set a timer and then come back 10 or 15 minutes. Chunk it up so it's not the end all be all. I got to sit here for 2 hours and there's a fight that happens because they don't have the energy. They've got to have these little short dopamine boost breaks to get them through. Fidget tools. Anytime you have something that's sensory input, the brain typically stays more attuned. So having them have something in their hand whenever they're having a conversation with you, or even some parents get really upset about them having fidget tools at the table for dinner. Okay, yes, but you want to have a conversation? Have a fidget tool there, not one that's really super distracting, but just something to rub against or Sensory input helps them stay attuned.
Okay.
And movement. Movement is a big one. I may talk about this a little bit more later, but I have seen a drastic, I don't have research to back it, but martial arts, taekwondo, karate, it works on the balance, which is a part of the brain that struggles, the cerebellum, struggles in an ADHD brain to stay balanced. They're usually off kilter, just a hair, but physically off kilter, just a hair. And so martial arts helps to teach them how to be still, how to hone their power, how to feel powerful, and how to be balanced. I hope there's some research that's done at some point on martial arts and ADHD. And maybe there is, and I just haven't read it yet. But I have seen huge improvement in kids that I've worked with that have gone in to do martial arts as a form of movement.
So moving beyond that a little bit, what about team sports? Does that also help the ADHD brain?
Yes, absolutely. Social awareness, the ability to read social cues and to know where to come in or not come in or say or not say or run after the ball or pass the ball. All of those help expand the social awareness of a kid, which is an area that they struggle with because of the amount of input that they're getting when they're trying to have a conversation with their friend and they're hearing this other conversation and they're feeling the sun shining down on their head and the tag in their shirt and they're thinking about what they had last night for dinner. That's a lot to handle in a social environment. And so they get overwhelmed. And a lot of them will recluse and want to just stay in their bedroom with electronics, right? Because electronics are safe and I can talk to somebody via the headset without actually having to deal with the social awareness, the social awkwardness of being out in public. But team sports tends to take the pressure off a little bit because they have that dopamine rush, that adrenaline rush. And so they're feeling good, but they're also practicing being socially aware as well.
Any other ideas for quick remedies?
Maybe like a distraction-free zone at home. I have a 6-year-old that I'm working with, and he likes to decide where he wants to do his homework. You know, it's a power thing. I want to do it in the bathtub. I want to do it on my bed. I want to do my homework out by the pool. If you can create a predictable distraction as much as possible free, distraction-free zone, and let them know we're going to do this for 10 minutes, and then the timer's going to go off, and then we're going to shift, and we're going to do this. And then we're going to come back to it. But it goes back to chunking. But if you can create a zone where there's as little distraction as possible, it's really hard because you can't control the outside, right? You can't control the lawnmower. Right. As much as possible, that helps set them up for success.
Okay. Brandie, thank you so much for being with me here and giving us such an incredible understanding of ADHD.
You are absolutely welcome. It's been a joy.
Where can folks find you?
Sure. I am the owner of Hills and Valleys Family Coaching and Counseling. I am located in Cabarrus County, but I serve a variety of counties because I am willing to travel. I do not have a brick and mortar. I will meet with clients at parks, at coffee shops, or if I've met with them a couple of times outside of the home, then we may move to home-based. But you can find me online. You can also send in a contact form or reach out via text or phone call or email. I am readily available to chat with you about your family.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. We hope today's conversation helped you better understand ADHD and offered some practical short-term tools you can start using right away. Next week, we'll continue our talk with Brandie in part 2, where we'll explore long-term approaches for managing ADHD and creating lasting growth. This is Michelle Droll signing off. Looking forward to having you with us again on the Nurtured Woman podcast. Want to get your business in front of an engaged audience? Podcast ads boost brand awareness by 28%. That means more people remembering you. The Nurtured Woman podcast is the perfect place to share your message. We'll craft a custom ad and feature it in the middle of the show. Don't miss this chance to connect with our listeners in a meaningful way. Let's get your business heard. Reach out today to Michelle Droll at mdroll@lknconnect.com. A big thank you to our featured sponsor, Bleaches NC, your expert carpet and upholstery cleaning service. From stubborn stains to odors, they tackle it all with safe, effective solutions. Don't forget, mention the Nurtured Woman podcast for 15% off your first cleaning. Call 984-51-GRIME today.
Another thank you to Kristen Dorninger. Buying a home is a huge decision, and Kristen is the realtor you want by your side. Professional, trustworthy, and genuinely invested in finding the right home for you. Kristen handled all the details and made the process seamless for my family. Whether you're buying or selling, Kristen is here to guide you every step of the way. Call Kristen Dorninger at 704-928-6573, agent with Southern Homes of the Carolinas.